Most women scream. Most women cry. When Morgan handed Alicia the divorce papers throwing 5 years of marriage into the trash for a woman 10 years younger, he expected a war. He had his lawyers ready. He had his assets hidden. He was prepared for the ugliest battle of his life. But Alicia didn't scream. She didn't even look up from her coffee. She just picked up a pen, signed the document without reading a single clause, and slid it back across the marble table. Morgan thought he had won. He thought she was weak. He had no idea that by signing those papers she wasn't losing a husband, she was unleashing a titan. And when he saw her again 3 months later, she wasn't the crying ex-wife he expected. She was the one woman in the room he couldn't afford to talk to. The sound of the pen scratching against the paper was louder than a gunshot in the silent kitchen. Morgan Sterling sat across from his wife Alicia, his heart hammering against his ribs not from guilt but from adrenaline. He was the VP of Sterling & Co., a man used to hostile takeovers and boardroom brawls. He had spent the last 3 weeks rehearsing this moment in the mirror. He had prepared arguments for every accusation she would throw at him. He was ready for her to bring up his late nights. He was ready for her to mention the receipts from the Ritz-Carlton found in his jacket pocket. He was ready for the tears, the breaking of plates, the begging. "I'm leaving Alicia," he had said, his voice practiced and cold. "I've met someone else. Someone who understands the direction my life is going. Someone who fits my future, not my past." He waited. Alicia Vance, a woman who had spent the last 5 years folding his laundry, hosting his dull dinner parties, and managing his schedule, simply took a sip of her black coffee. She was wearing an oversized beige cardigan, her hair tied back in a messy bun. She looked nothing like Chloe, the vibrant 23-year-old marketing intern waiting for Morgan in the Audi outside. Alicia set the mug down. "Okay," she said. Morgan blinked, his brow furrowing. "Okay, did you hear me? I said I want a divorce." "I heard you, Morgan," Alicia said, her voice terrifyingly even. "Do you have the papers?" Morgan fumbled with his leather briefcase, his confidence faltering for a split second. This wasn't the script. Yes. My attorney James Rotherham drafted these. Now I want to be fair, but you need to understand that the prenup is ironclad. You get the Honda, the apartment lease is in my name, so you'll have 30 days to vacate and—" Alicia reached out her hand. "Give them to me." He slid the thick packet across the granite island. He watched her eyes. They weren't red, they weren't glassy. They were opaque like a shuttered window. She didn't flip to the section on alimony. She didn't check the division of assets. She flipped to the last page, found the line marked respondent, and uncapped a cheap ballpoint pen. Scritch. Scratch. She signed Alicia Vance, not Alicia Sterling. She had already dropped his name. "Alicia, wait," Morgan said, a sudden wave of unease washing over him. "You haven't even read it. You're waiving your right to contest the alimony. You're walking away with almost nothing." She looked up then, and for the first time Morgan saw something in her eyes that chilled him. It wasn't sadness. It was boredom. "I don't want your money, Morgan," she said softly. "And I certainly don't want to fight for a man who doesn't want to be here. You're free." She stood up, walked to the fridge, and pulled out a bottle of sparkling water. "Is there anything else, because I have a busy afternoon?" Morgan sat frozen. The victory he had craved felt hollow. He wanted her to fight for him. He wanted proof that he was a prize worth losing. Her indifference made him feel small. "Fine," Morgan snapped, snatching the papers back. "If you want to be an idiot and starve, that's your problem. Chloe is waiting for me." "Tell her I said good luck," Alicia replied, her back turned to him. Morgan stormed out of the house, slamming the heavy oak door behind him. He marched down the driveway to his silver Audi R8, where Chloe was checking her makeup in the visor mirror. "Well?" Chloe asked, popping her gum. "Was it a nightmare? Did she scream?" Morgan threw the papers into the back seat. She signed. No contest. Chloe squealed, clapping her hands. "Oh my God, Morgan. That's amazing. We're free. We can book the Aspen trip without worrying about court dates." Morgan started the engine, gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. He looked back at the house one last time. The curtains didn't move. No one was watching him leave. "Yeah," Morgan muttered, pulling out onto the street. "Amazing." But as he drove away, the unease in his gut grew. Elysia had been a graphic designer when they met, making modest money. She had quit to support his career. She had no savings that he knew of, no family in the city. By signing those papers, she had effectively made herself homeless. Why wasn't she scared? 3 months passed. Life for Morgan Sterling was on paper perfect. With Elysia out of the picture, he had fully integrated Chloe into his life. They were the it couple of his social circle. Chloe was young, loud, and loved to spend Morgan's money on things that showed off his status tables at Dorsia weekends and the Hamptons' front row seats at Knicks games. But the perfection was exhausting. Chloe wasn't like Elysia. Chloe didn't organize his life. She consumed it. The house was always a mess of shopping bags. She forgot to write down his meetings. She complained when he worked late. And strangely, Elysia had vanished off the face of the earth. Morgan had expected her to call. He expected a drunken voicemail begging for money, or at least a text asking about mail she'd left behind. But there was nothing. Her phone number was disconnected. Her social media accounts, which she rarely used anyway, were deactivated. He drove by the old apartment complex she used to like, thinking he might see her old Honda, but she wasn't there. It was as if Elysia Vance had never existed. "Stop obsessing over her," Chloe snapped one evening over dinner at Le Bernardin. "She's probably living in a trailer in Ohio with her parents. She's a loser, Morgan. That's why you left her." "I'm not obsessing," Morgan lied, taking a sip of wine. "I just find it odd. She didn't take the alimony. That's $50,000 she left on the table. Who does that?" "Someone who knows they aren't worth it." Chloe laughed. Morgan forced a smile, but his attention was caught by a conversation at the table next to them. 2 men in bespoke Italian suits were speaking in hushed, reverent tones. Morgan recognized one of them, David Geffen, a massive player in the tech investment sphere. "Have you seen the projections for Valkyrie?" the first man whispered. "The IPO is rumored to be in the billions. It's going to shatter the tech sector." "I heard the CEO is a ghost," the second man replied. "Total recluse. Operates under a pseudonym. They say the proprietary algorithm was written by a single person in a basement over 5 years. Morgan's ears pricked up. Valkyrie Systems. It was the buzz of Wall Street. A new AI-driven logistics software that was rendering traditional shipping models obsolete. Everyone wanted a piece of it, but the company was notoriously private. "I'd kill to get an invite to the Gatsby Gala next week," the first man continued. "Rumor has it the founder of Valkyrie is finally going to make a public appearance. It's the event of the decade. The ticket alone is $50,000. Morgan looked down at his plate. The Gatsby Gala at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. It was the most exclusive charity event in New York. If he could get in there, if he could shake hands with the people behind Valkyrie, he could secure his position at Sterling and Company for life. He could finally step out of the shadow of his father-in-law, well, ex-father-in-law, who had founded the firm. "Chloe," Morgan said suddenly, "we need to go to the Gatsby Gala." Chloe's eyes lit up. "The Met? Oh my God, yes, I saw the dress code online. It's Gilded Age glamour. I need a dress from Vera Wang. Can we afford the tickets?" "I'll pull some strings," Morgan said, his ambition overriding his financial caution. "I know a guy on the board. It'll cost us, but it's an investment." The next week was a blur of favors and wire transfers. Morgan spent nearly $40,000 securing 2 tickets through a back-channel broker. It was a reckless amount of money dipping into the savings he had protected during the divorce, but he told himself it was necessary. He needed a win. His numbers at work were slipping because he was too distracted by Chloe's constant demands. The night of the gala arrived. The The air was crisp and the steps of the Met were covered in a red carpet that seemed to stretch for miles. Paparazzi flashed blinding lights as celebrities and titans of industry ascended the stairs. Morgan stepped out of his limo, adjusting his bow tie. Chloe was on his arm, wearing a dress that was perhaps a little too revealing for the somber elegance of the event, but she looked stunning. Morgan puffed out his chest. This was where he belonged. They moved through the great hall, sipping champagne. Morgan scanned the room, looking for targets. He saw Elon Musk talking to a Saudi prince. He saw the CEO of Goldman Sachs. "This is it, babe," Chloe whispered, clutching his arm. "We made it." Morgan Sterling," a voice called out from behind him. Morgan turned to see Adrian Pendleton, an old rival from college who now worked at a hedge fund. "Adrian," Morgan nodded. "Good to see you." "Surprised to see you here," Adrian said with a smirk. "I heard Sterling and Comey had a rough quarter, but hey, I guess the alimony payments are low, right? Heard the ex-wife rolled over." Morgan stiffened. Alicia wasn't the issue, and yes, the divorce was amicable. "Lucky you," Adrian laughed. "My divorce cost me a yacht. Anyway, are you here for the Valkyrie reveal?" Everyone is placing bets on who it is. Some say it's a kid from MIT. Others say it's a collective of ex-Google engineers. "I'm here to make a deal," Morgan said smoothly. Suddenly the lights in the massive hall dimmed. A hush fell over the crowd of billionaires and socialites. A spotlight hit the stage at the Temple of Dender. The host, a famous CNN anchor, stepped up to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your generosity tonight. But I know why you are all here. For the past year, the business world has been asking one question. Who is the mind behind Valkyrie Systems? Who wrote the code that is currently valued at $3 billion? Morgan leaned forward, his heart racing. This was it. "Tonight," the host continued, "we are honored to finally introduce the founder and CEO, a woman who built her empire in silence while the world underestimated her. Please welcome the Phantom of Fifth Avenue." The heavy velvet curtains parted. Morgan squinted. A silhouette stepped forward into the spotlight. It was a woman. She was wearing a gown made of midnight blue silk that seemed to shimmer like liquid starlight. It was elegant, regal, and cost more than Morgan's car. Her hair was styled in sleek Hollywood waves, diamonds dripping from her ears. She stepped up to the mic, her face illuminated by the harsh white light. Morgan dropped his champagne glass. It shattered on the stone floor, the sound echoing, but he didn't hear it. He couldn't breathe. His knees buckled and he had to grab Chloe's shoulder to stay upright. "What?" Chloe hissed. "Morgan, what is it? Who is she?" Morgan's mouth opened, but no sound came out. He stared at the woman on stage, the billionaire, the genius, the most powerful person in the room. It was Alicia. The applause was thunderous. It wasn't polite clapping. It was a roar, a physical wave of sound that shook the Temple of Dender. But Morgan Sterling couldn't hear it. The blood rushing in his ears sounded like a freight train. "Morgan," Chloe hissed, digging her fake nails into his bicep. "Morgan, you're making a scene. Why are you staring at her like that? Do you know her?" Morgan couldn't tear his eyes away from the stage. The woman standing there commanded the room with a terrifying grace. She waited for the applause to die down, a small knowing smile playing on her lips. Lips painted a deep velvety crimson that Morgan had never seen on her before. That's Alicia." Morgan choked out his voice, barely a whisper. Chloe froze. She squinted at the stage, then looked back at Morgan, her face twisting in confusion and disgust. The ex-wife, the frumpy housewife who signed the papers in a cardigan. That woman. "Yes," Morgan breathed. "You're lying." Chloe scoffed, though her voice wavered. "That woman is wearing a vintage Schiaparelli gown. That necklace is Cartier. She looks like royalty." On stage, Alicia leaned into the microphone. Her voice, amplified by the state-of-the-art sound system, was smooth, low, and confident. It was the voice Morgan had heard every day for 5 years, but stripped of the timidity, the deference. "Thank you," Elysia said. "For a long time I was told that my value lay in my ability to support others. I was told that my place was in the background, that silence was my duty." Morgan felt a cold sweat break out on his forehead. Was she talking about him? But silence, Elysia continued, her eyes scanning the crowd, is where you hear the things others miss. While the world was busy shouting, busy posturing, busy selling. She paused, and for a terrifying second, Morgan felt her gaze linger on the dark corner where he stood. I was building. Valkyrie wasn't created in a boardroom. It was created at a kitchen table late at night in the quiet hours when no one was watching, when no one cared to look. The crowd murmured in appreciation of her humility. Morgan felt like vomiting. The kitchen table, the granite island where he had tossed his keys every night, ignoring her while he checked his emails. She had been sitting there, working. They call Valkyrie a logistics miracle, Elysia said, her voice strengthening. But it's really just a system for cutting out the dead weight, for identifying what is essential and discarding what is merely noise. I learned that lesson the hard way. But once I cut the noise from my own life, I became limitless. The room erupted again. Oh my God, Chloe whispered, stepping away from Morgan as if he were contagious. She's talking about you. She's calling you the dead weight. Morgan felt a tap on his shoulder. He spun around, jumpy. It was Adrian Pendleton again, grinning like a shark. Morgan, you sly dog. Adrian beamed, clapping him on the back. Why didn't you tell us? You kept the creator of Valkyrie secret for 5 years. That's the greatest play I've ever seen. You must be heavily invested. No wonder you didn't contest the divorce. You probably have stock options coming out of your ears. Morgan's stomach dropped. Stock options. He had nothing. He had the prenup that he had insisted on, the prenup that kept their assets strictly separate. If Elysia had built this company during their marriage and he had legally separated his finances from hers to protect himself, he had also legally separated himself from her billions. I need a drink, Morgan stammered. He stumbled toward the bar, Chloe trailing behind him, looking furious. He ordered a double Scotch neat and downed it in one gulp. His mind was racing. How Elysia didn't know how to code. She was a graphic designer. She made logos for bakeries. She didn't build AI algorithms. This had to be a mistake. Maybe she was just the face of the company, a figurehead. He turned back to the room. Elysia had descended from the stage and was immediately swarmed. But not by fans, by titans. Morgan watched in horror as Tim Cook shook her hand. He saw the head of the Sequoia Capital Fund leaning in close, laughing at something she said. She wasn't just a guest. She was the sun everyone was orbiting. I need to talk to her, Morgan said, a desperate plan forming in his head. She's my wife. I mean my ex-wife. We have a history. If I can just talk to her, remind her of the good times. You're pathetic, Chloe spat. She just humiliated you in front of the entire Forbes 500 list, and you think you can charm her? She hates you, Morgan. She doesn't hate me, Morgan insisted, adjusting his tie, though his hands were shaking. She loved me. She signed those papers because she was hurt. This is a cry for attention. She's doing this to show me what I'm missing. Morgan pushed through the crowd. He was a tall man used to parting seas of people, but tonight the crowd was dense with security and sycophants. He elbowed a senator out of the way, ignored a glare from a famous actress, and finally reached the edge of the velvet rope guarding the VIP circle. A massive man in a black suit blocked his path. Private reception, sir. I know her, Morgan snapped, pointing at Elysia, who was standing 20 feet away, sipping champagne with a man who looked like a European duke. I'm her husband, ex-husband, Morgan Sterling. The guard looked at a clipboard, then back at Morgan. His expression didn't change. Name's not on the list, Mr. Sterling. Tell her I'm here. Morgan shouted, his voice cracking. He saw heads turn. People were staring. Elysia! Elysia! Elysia paused. She slowly turned her head. Her eyes locked onto Morgan's. There was no surprise in them. No anger. Just that same chilling boredom he had seen in the kitchen 3 months ago. She said something to the guard, a quick, subtle nod. The guard stepped aside. "She'll see you," the guard grunted. Morgan straightened his jacket. He turned to give Chloe a smug look, but Chloe was already gone, disappearing into the crowd, likely distancing herself from the sinking ship. Morgan walked into the circle. Up close, Elysia looked even more expensive. Her skin glowed. She smelled of jasmine and money. "Hello, Morgan," she said. Her tone was polite, distant, like she was greeting a waiter she vaguely remembered. "Elysia," Morgan said, putting on his best boardroom smile. "You look incredible. I had no idea you were working on something like this. Why didn't you tell me we were partners?" Elysia raised an eyebrow. "Partners, Morgan. For the last 3 years of our marriage, you didn't even know the password to my laptop. You never asked what I was doing." "I was busy," Morgan pleaded. "I was building Sterling and Cody for us. But look, this is amazing. Valkyrie. It's huge. And I was thinking, we rushed things. The divorce papers. Maybe we were too hasty. We have a connection, Elysia. You can't deny that." The Duke, standing next to her, chuckled softly and walked away, giving them space. Elysia took a step closer to Morgan. She looked up at him, and for a second he thought he saw warmth. He thought he had her. "You're right, Morgan. We did have a connection," she said softly. "You provided the one thing I needed most to build Valkyrie." Morgan smiled, relief washing over him. Support, stability. "Neglect," Elysia said. Morgan's smile froze. "If you had been a better husband, Morgan, I never would have finished the code," she said, her voice calm and deadly. "If you had come home on time, if you had wanted to talk to me, if you had taken me on dates, I would have been distracted, but you gave me the gift of solitude. You ignored me so thoroughly that I had thousands of hours to perfect the algorithm. You made me feel so invisible that I learned how to disappear and work in the shadows." She took a sip of her champagne. "So thank you. You were the perfect catalyst. But now that the work is done, I don't need the catalyst anymore." "Elysia, you can't be serious," Morgan hissed, realizing people were listening. "I'm your husband. I have rights. That company was built while we were married. I'm entitled to you." "You're entitled to nothing," she cut him off. "Check the prenup, Morgan. All assets created, acquired, or developed independently by either party remain the sole property of said party. You had your lawyer add that clause because you thought I'd go after your family trust. You thought you were protecting your millions." She leaned in close, her lips brushing his ear. "Instead, you protected my billions." She pulled back, her eyes dancing with amusement. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a meeting with the Secretary of Defense. Enjoy the gala, Morgan. I heard the shrimp is excellent." She turned on her heel and walked away. 2 security guards immediately stepped in front of Morgan, forming a wall of black wool. Morgan stood there alone in the center of the most exclusive party in New York, realizing that he was the poorest man in the room. The morning after the gala, Morgan didn't go to work. He couldn't. His face was plastered across page 6, but not in the way he had always dreamed. The headline read, "The Billionaire and the Ex-Tech Queen Elysia Vance stuns at Met Gala, while ex-husband Morgan Sterling watches from the sidelines." There was a photo of him shouting at the security guard, his face red and distorted, looking desperate. Next to it was a photo of Elysia, serene and glowing, shaking hands with the president. Morgan sat in his penthouse, the apartment that suddenly felt very small and very mortgaged. Chloe had not come home last night. She had sent a text at 3:00 a.m. "I'm staying at a friend's. I need space to think." He knew what that meant. Chloe was gone. She had sniffed out the scent of failure on him like a bloodhound. Morgan threw his phone across the room. It cracked against the wall. He needed to understand. He needed to know how. He went to his study and booted up his laptop. He frantically searched for Valkyrie systems. He dug through Wired articles, TechCrunch interviews, anything he could find. He found an interview Elysia had given to the Wall Street Journal that morning. He clicked the video. Elysia was sitting in a sunlit studio wearing a white blazer. She looked powerful, relaxed. Interviewer: Elysia, the world is shocked. You were a graphic designer. How did you make the leap to advanced AI logistics? Elysia: I didn't make a leap. I made a pivot. My background in design taught me about patterns, visual flow, efficiency. I started noticing that global shipping logistics were messy. They lacked symmetry. I started coding as a hobby just to see if I could visualize the data better. I taught myself Python and C++ at night. Interviewer: At night you were married then, weren't you? Elysia, smiling politely: Yes, my husband worked very late hours. I found myself with a lot of free time. I didn't like watching TV. So I learned. I built a simulation. Then I fed it real-world data. When the simulation predicted the supply chain collapse of 2023 6 months before it happened, I knew I had something. Morgan paused the video. 2023. He remembered that year. He had spent that entire year stressing about the market crash, yelling at Elysia because his portfolio was down. Meanwhile, she had been sitting in the guest room predicting the crash he was losing money on. He remembered one night specifically. He had come home drunk after a client dinner, which was actually drinks with a paralegal. Elysia had come downstairs, her eyes bright, holding a notebook. Morgan, look at this, she had said. I think I found a way to optimize shipping routes using a fractal algorithm. It's really interesting. Not now, Elysia, he had snapped, loosening his tie. I've been dealing with real business all day. I don't want to look at your little puzzles. She had closed the notebook. Okay, she had whispered. I won't bother you with it again. Morgan put his head in his hands. He groaned a deep guttural sound of regret. She had tried to show him. She had tried to bring him in. And he had dismissed a billion-dollar idea as a little puzzle. The intercom buzzed. Morgan ignored it. It buzzed again, long and insistent. He walked to the wall panel and pressed the button. What? Mr. Sterling? The doorman's voice was nervous. There are quite a few people down here to see you. Reporters. And a process server. A process server. Morgan frowned. For what? I don't know, sir. But there's also a delivery. A large crate. It's marked personal effects. From Vance Industries. Morgan's heart skipped a beat. A crate? Send the crate up, keep the reporters out. 10 minutes later, 2 movers wheeled a wooden crate into his living room. They left and Morgan stood alone with the box. It had a crowbar attached to the side. He pried it open. Inside, packed in packing peanuts, were things from their old house. Things he hadn't even realized were missing. A framed photo of them from their honeymoon in Bali. His old college sweatshirt she used to wear. A ceramic mug she had made in a pottery class that said "World's Okayest Husband." And on top of it all, a letter. On thick, cream-colored stationery. Morgan picked it up. His hands shook. Morgan, I'm clearing out my storage. I realized I don't need to hold on to the past anymore. You can have these memories. They belong to a version of me that doesn't exist now. Also, I saw the news about Sterling and Company struggling with the new Asian market regulations. It's a shame. If you had asked, I could have told you that Valkyrie's data predicted that shift 2 years ago. But then again, you never really liked listening to me. I've purchased the building your office is in. Don't worry, I won't evict you. I'm raising the rent to market value, though. It's only fair. Business is business, right? E. Morgan dropped the letter. She had bought his building. She was his landlord. He walked to the window and looked out at the New York skyline. Somewhere out there in a penthouse far higher and far more luxurious than his Elysia was sipping coffee looking at the city she now owned a piece of. He had wanted a trophy wife. He had wanted someone who looked good on his arm and didn't challenge him. He realized now with a crushing weight that he had been married to a dragon. And he was the idiot who had poked her until she woke up. The phone rang. It was his boss, the CEO of Sterling & Co. "Morgan," the CEO barked. "Why is the rent on our headquarters going up by 400% next month? Who is this new landlord group, Vance Holdings? Fix this or you're out." Morgan stared at the phone. He couldn't fix it. He couldn't fix anything. The collapse of Morgan Sterling's life didn't happen all at once. It was a slow, agonizing slide like a car losing its brakes on an icy hill. It started with the rent. The morning after the crate arrived, Morgan walked into the Sterling & Company boardroom. The atmosphere was toxic. The CEO, Adrian Sterling, Morgan's uncle, which was the only reason Morgan had survived this long, was purple with rage. 400%! Adrian slammed his fist on the mahogany table. "They want a 400% increase. We've been in this building since 1985. This Vance Holdings is trying to bleed us dry." Morgan stared at his hands. He knew exactly why the rent was going up. It wasn't market value. It was a tax on his infidelity. "I can fix this," Morgan said, his voice trembling slightly. "I know the owner. I can talk to her." "You know the owner?" Adrian squinted at him. "You mean the ex-wife? The one you dumped for that Instagram model? The one who is currently on the cover of Time magazine being hailed as the Oracle of AI?" "Yes," Morgan said. "I'll handle it." Morgan spent the next 3 days calling Elysia's office. He called her personal line. He called her assistant. He even tried emailing her old Gmail address. Every call was met with a polite robotic receptionist. "Ms. Vance is currently unavailable. If this is regarding a tenancy matter, please contact our legal department." On the 4th day, Morgan came home early, defeated to find his penthouse eerily quiet. The closets were open. Chloe's clothes were gone. But she hadn't just taken her clothes. She had taken the espresso machine, the Dyson vacuum, and the signed Warhol print Morgan had bought at auction. On the kitchen counter, the same granite island where Elysia had signed the divorce papers, was a note written in purple Sharpie. "Morgan, I can't do this. The bad press is ruining my brand partnerships. Fashion Nova dropped me because people are calling you a fumble in my comments. I'm going to Dubai with Adrian Pendleton. He bought me a G-Wagon. Don't call me." Chloe Morgan crumbled the note. Adrian Pendleton, the guy from the gala, the guy who had mocked him. The next morning, Morgan walked into work hungover, wearing a wrinkled shirt. Security stopped him at the turnstile. "ID won't scan Mr. Sterling," the guard said, avoiding eye contact. "It's a glitch," Morgan snapped. "Let me in." "It's not a glitch, Morgan." Morgan turned to see his uncle standing in the lobby, flanked by 2 HR representatives. "Uncle Adrian." "The board voted last night," Adrian said coldly. "We're relocating the headquarters to New Jersey to avoid the rent hike. And as for you, you've become a liability. The clients don't trust a man who throws away $1 billion asset like Elysia Vance. It shows poor judgment. Extremely poor judgment." "You're firing me," Morgan gasped. "I'm family." "You're a fool," Adrian said. "Hand over your badge. Your severance is in the mail." Morgan stood on the sidewalk of Fifth Avenue holding a cardboard box containing a stapler and a dead succulent. It was raining. He had no job, no wife, no girlfriend. And thanks to his lavish spending on Chloe, his liquid cash was running dangerously low. He checked his bank account on his phone. $12,000. That wouldn't even cover the mortgage on the penthouse for another month. Rage began to boil in his chest. This wasn't fair. Elysia had played him. She had hidden her success, hidden her money. That had to be illegal. They were married when she wrote that code. That meant half of Valkyrie belonged to him. He didn't need to beg her. He needed to sue her. He pulled out his phone and dialed the number of a lawyer he saw on late-night TV commercials, a man named Saul Berkowitz, known as the Pit Bull of Wall Street. Berkowitz, the voice answered on the first ring. I want to sue Elysia Vance, Morgan said, staring up at the rain. I want half of everything. There was a pause on the line, then a low, greedy chuckle. Come to my office, Mr. Sterling. Let's go hunting. The conference room at Vance Industries was located on the 90th floor. It was all glass overlooking the city like a god's observatory. Morgan sat on one side of the long table flanked by Saul Berkowitz. Saul was wearing a cheap suit that smelled of stale tobacco. He looked out of place in the pristine high-tech office. Opposite them sat Elysia. She looked bored. She was typing on a tablet, barely acknowledging their presence. Next to her was her lawyer, Marcus Thorne, a man so legendary in New York legal circles that he was rumored to have drafted the devil's own contracts. Mr. Sterling, Marcus Thorne began, his voice smooth as velvet. This lawsuit is frivolous. You signed a prenuptial agreement. You waived all rights to independent intellectual property. We are here as a courtesy to give you one chance to withdraw before we countersue for legal fees, which will bankrupt you. We're not withdrawing. Saul slammed a fist on the table. My client supported Ms. Vance for 5 years. He paid the mortgage. He paid for the food that fueled her brain while she wrote that code that constitutes an investment. Under the doctrine of equitable distribution, he is entitled to a share of the fruits of that labor. Elysia finally looked up. She took off her reading glasses. Supported me. She repeated, a wry smile playing on her lips. Is that how you remember it, Morgan? I paid the bills, Elysia, Morgan said, finding his courage. You quit your job. You sat at home. I worked 80-hour weeks to keep a roof over your head. You couldn't have built Valkyrie if you were working a 9-to-5. I bought you the time. You bought me time, Elysia mused. That's an interesting perspective. She tapped her tablet. A holographic screen projected onto the center of the table. It displayed a complex timeline of data logs. Do you know what Valkyrie actually does, Morgan? Elysia asked. It's logistics, Morgan scoffed. Shipping routes, trucks. That's the public application, Elysia corrected. But the core engine, the heart of the code. It's a pattern recognition system designed to identify anomalies. It finds mistakes. It finds leaks. It finds fraud. Morgan frowned. What does that have to do with me? I started writing the code 4 years ago, Elysia said, standing up and walking slowly around the table. Because I was bored, yes, but also because I was worried. You were coming home stressed. You were muttering about lost accounts and rounding errors in the Asian markets. She pressed a button. The hologram changed. It showed bank statements. Sterling & Company internal ledgers. Morgan's face went pale. These are your trades, Morgan. From 2022 to 2024, Elysia said softly. You were sloppy. You were moving money from client escrow accounts to cover your own bad bets on crypto. It wasn't just negligence. It was embezzlement. Federal prison time, 20 years minimum. Saul Berkowitz looked at Morgan. Is this true? Morgan couldn't speak. He felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. He had done it just a few times, he told himself. Just to cover some losses. He intended to put it back. I was going to fix it, Morgan whispered. You didn't fix it, Elysia said. I did. She leaned over the table, her eyes locking onto his. I used the early version of Valkyrie to penetrate Sterling & Company's servers. I didn't steal money, Morgan. I rearranged it. My algorithm balanced your books in real-time micro-trading in the milliseconds between transactions to generate enough profit to fill the holes you dug. I spent 3 years quietly patching your crimes from our kitchen table. Morgan stared at her in horror. You knew. I saved you, Elysia said. Every day. While you were out having dinner with Chloe, while you were buying expensive watches, my code was working in the background, keeping the SEC from knocking on our door. I wasn't just building a company, Morgan. I was keeping you out of jail. The room was deadly silent. Even Saul Berkowitz looked terrified. "I did it because I loved you," Alicia said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I thought you were just stressed. I thought if I fixed the problem, the man I married would come back. But he never did." She turned to Marcus Thorne. "Show him the file." Marcus slid a thick red folder across the table. "This folder," Alicia said, "contains the unedited logs. It proves exactly what you did and exactly how I fixed it. If you proceed with this lawsuit, Morgan, if you try to claim ownership of my code, you are legally claiming ownership of the mechanism that hid your embezzlement. I will be forced to release these logs into discovery, and the FBI will be very interested to see them." She sat back down and crossed her legs. "So here is the deal. You will drop the lawsuit. You will sign a non-disclosure agreement stating you never had anything to do with Valkyrie, and in exchange I will keep this folder in my private vault. You stay free, but you walk away with nothing." Morgan looked at the red folder. It was a loaded gun pointed right at his head. He realized then the true magnitude of his mistake. He hadn't just divorced a wife. He had divorced his guardian angel. He had thrown away the only person in the world who had the intelligence to save him from himself. Morgan's voice cracked. "I'll sign." "Good choice," Saul Berkowitz said, snapping his briefcase shut and standing up. "I'm dropping you as a client, Mr. Sterling. Good luck paying my bill." Saul stormed out. Morgan took the pen Marcus offered. He signed the withdrawal papers. He signed the NDA. When he was done, he looked up at Alicia one last time. She was already looking at her tablet again, her face illuminated by the blue light of the empire she built. "Alicia," he whispered. "Goodbye, Morgan," she said, without looking up. Security escorted him out. Morgan walked out of the skyscraper and back onto the street. The rain had stopped, but the city felt colder than ever. He looked up at the towering glass building. He was safe from prison, yes, but he was 40 years old, unemployed, broke, and blacklisted. He walked to a subway station. He couldn't afford a cab anymore. As he waited for the train, he saw a digital billboard flash on the tunnel wall. It was an ad for Valkyrie Systems. The tagline read, "See what others miss." Morgan closed his eyes and leaned his head against the dirty tile wall. The train approached, the screech of the brakes sounding like a scream. He had missed everything. 2 years passed. In the high-speed world of New York finance, 2 years is a lifetime. It is enough time for empires to rise, for scandals to be forgotten, and for men like Morgan Sterling to become ghosts. Morgan no longer lived in a penthouse. He lived in a basement studio in Queens with a window that looked out onto a brick wall. His Audi R8 was long gone, repossessed to pay off debts that Saul Berkowitz had failed to shield him from. He didn't work on Wall Street anymore. The blacklist was effective. No firm would touch the man who had embezzled from his own family and then tried to sue the most popular female CEO in America. Morgan now worked as a night shift dispatcher for a trucking company in New Jersey. The irony was a bitter pill he had to swallow every single night. He spent his hours staring at screens, tracking trucks, ensuring deliveries were made on time. He was doing manually what Alicia's software Valkyrie did automatically in milliseconds. Every night at the depot, the drivers would sit around drinking bad coffee, talking about the news. And every night it seemed Alicia's name was in the air. "Did you see Vance Industries bought out that German robotics firm?" one driver asked, flipping through a newspaper. "She's unstoppable. They say she's going to run for Senate soon." "She's a genius," another driver nodded. "And look at her. She looks happier than ever. I heard she just got engaged to that French architect." Morgan sat in the corner, his cap pulled down low over his eyes. He didn't say a word. He just stared at his monitor, watching the blinking dots of the trucks moving across the map. He had tried to move on. He had tried to date. But every woman he met seemed dim compared to Alicia. They talked about trivial things. They didn't have that quiet intensity, that hidden depth that he had once mistaken for boredom. He realized too late that Elysia's silence wasn't emptiness. It was a reservoir, and he was dying of thirst. One rainy Tuesday in November, the depot manager called Morgan into his office. "Sterling," the manager grunted, chewing on a cigar. "We got a priority job. A special courier run into the city. My usual guy called in sick. You have a clean driving record. You want the overtime?" "Sure." Morgan said, his voice raspy. He needed the money. His rent was due. "Good. It's a white glove delivery, high value. Take the van to Fifth Avenue. Drop off is at the Vance Foundation Charity Gala." Morgan froze. "The Vance Foundation?" "Yeah. Some charity auction items. Don't scratch the boxes. Get moving." Morgan walked to the van, his legs feeling like lead. Fate, it seemed, wasn't done punishing him. He had to deliver packages to his ex-wife's party, a party celebrating the wealth she had built after leaving him. He drove into Manhattan, the city lights blurring in the rain. He pulled up to the service entrance of the Plaza Hotel. It was the same hotel where he used to take Chloe for drinks. Now he was entering through the loading dock. He unloaded the boxes, stacking them onto a dolly. He pushed them through the service corridors, navigating the maze of the hotel's underbelly until he reached the freight elevator. He pressed the button for the ballroom level. When the doors opened, the noise hit him. The music, the laughter, the clinking of crystal. It was the sound of the world he used to own. He pushed the cart into the staging area behind the main ballroom. He was supposed to leave the boxes and go, but the curtains were slightly parted. He couldn't help himself. He peeked through. The ballroom was transformed into a winter wonderland. White roses everywhere. An orchestra playing Waltz No. 2. And there in the center of the dance floor was Elysia. She was wearing silver. She looked older, yes, but stronger. There were lines around her eyes that spoke of wisdom, not weariness. She was dancing with a man, tall, kind-faced, with graying hair. He was looking at her as if she were the only person in the universe. He was whispering something to her, and she threw her head back and laughed, a genuine belly-deep laugh that Morgan realized he had never heard in 5 years of marriage. Morgan watched, mesmerized and horrified. "Hey, you!" A floor manager in a headset snapped his fingers at Morgan. "You, the delivery guy, leave the boxes and get lost. Guests are arriving. We don't want trash in the hallway." Trash? Morgan flinched. He looked back at Elysia one last time. She was happy. Truly, deeply happy. And she had achieved it all by removing him from the equation. He turned the cart around. "I'm going," Morgan muttered. Morgan drove the van back to New Jersey in silence. When he got back to his basement apartment, he felt a strange urge. He went to the closet and pulled out the old cardboard box, the one Elysia had sent him 2 years ago. He had sold most of the items inside for cash. The pottery mug was gone. The photo frame was sold for the silver. But there was one thing left at the bottom, an old USB drive. He had ignored it before, assuming it was just old tax documents or family photos he didn't want to see. But tonight, after seeing her laugh, he needed to know. He plugged the drive into his cheap laptop. There was only one file. It was a video file dated 1 week before he asked for the divorce. Morgan clicked play. The video opened. It was a webcam recording. Elysia was sitting at the kitchen island, the same island where the end began. She looked tired. She was wearing his old college sweatshirt. She looked into the camera and took a deep breath. "Hi, Morgan," the video Elysia said softly. "It's 2:00 a.m. You're not home yet. You said you were working, but I know you're not. I tracked the GPS on the car. You're at the Ritz." Morgan closed his eyes. "I'm recording this because I don't think I can say it to your face." Elysia continued, wiping a tear from her cheek. "I finished the beta version of Valkyrie tonight. It works. It really works. And my first thought wasn't about the money. It wasn't about the fame." She held up a piece of paper to the camera. It was a printout of code. "I named the core protocol the Sterling Protocol." I named it after you, because I did this for us. I wanted to build something big enough to secure our future so you wouldn't have to be so stressed, so you wouldn't have to look for happiness somewhere else. She paused, her voice breaking. I was going to surprise you with it on our anniversary next week. I was going to give you 50% of the company. I just wanted you to be proud of me. I just wanted you to see me. She looked down at her hands. But if you're seeing this video, it means I didn't give it to you. It means you left before I could. It means I had to rewrite the protocol and erase your name from the code. She looked directly into the lens, her eyes piercing through time and space to the man sitting in the basement. I loved you, Morgan. I loved you enough to build an empire for you. But you never looked up from your phone long enough to notice. Goodbye. The screen went black. Morgan sat in the darkness of his basement. The silence was deafening. He had lost the billions, yes. He had lost the status. But that wasn't the tragedy. The tragedy was that he had been loved by a woman who could move mountains, and he had traded her for a girl who liked expensive purses. He had been the inspiration for a masterpiece, and because of his own blindness, he had become the villain in her biography. He closed the laptop. He lay down on his single mattress, pulling the thin blanket up to his chin. Outside, a truck rumbled past carrying goods optimized by the Vance Logistics Network. The world was moving efficiently, perfectly, silently. And Morgan Sterling was finally completely part of the noise. Wow. That brings us to the end of Morgan and Alicia's story. It's a brutal reminder that sometimes the most valuable things in our lives are the ones sitting quietly right in front of us. Morgan chased the flash and the noise, thinking that was success, while Alicia was silently building an empire out of love for him until he gave her a reason to build it for herself. It really makes you wonder, how many of us are ignoring the Alicias in our lives while chasing something that doesn't matter? And do you think Morgan deserved his fate, or was the punishment of watching her success too harsh? I want to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of karma, betrayal, and the ultimate comeback, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a new story. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. He threw the divorce papers at her chest and laughed, telling everyone within earshot that he was finally trading in his dowdy wife for a younger, hotter model. Derek Sterling thought he had won. He had the high-paying job, the penthouse, and the mistress-turned-fiancé. He left Sarah with nothing but the clothes on her back and a broken heart. But Derek made one fatal calculation. He didn't know that the homeless old man Sarah had been feeding for months wasn't a beggar at all. He was the owner of the very empire Derek was desperate to join. And he had just died, leaving everything to the woman Derek just threw away. The ink on the divorce papers was barely dry when Derek Sterling checked his Rolex, a Submariner he'd bought with their joint savings account 3 months ago, without asking. "Are we done here?" Derek asked, not even looking at Sarah. He was too busy texting on his phone, a smirk playing on his lips. "I have a reservation at Le Bernardin at 8. Tiffany gets cranky if she has to wait for her lobster." Sarah Jensen sat across the cold metal table of the arbitration room, her hands folded tightly in her lap to stop them from shaking. She looked at the man she had supported for 7 years. She had worked double shifts at a diner to put him through business school. She had ironed his shirts, cooked his meals, and comforted him when he failed his first licensing exams. "Derek," Sarah whispered, her voice raspy, "you're taking the apartment and the car. How am I supposed to get to work?" Derek finally looked up. His eyes, once warm and blue, were now cold shards of ice. He let out a cruel, barking laugh. "Sarah, look at you. You're a waitress. You can take the bus. That apartment is for people who matter. People with a future. And let's be honest. You were just a placeholder until I found someone who matches my new tax bracket." The door to the conference room opened, and in walked Tiffany. She was 22, blonde, and wearing a coat that cost more than Sarah made in a year. She didn't acknowledge Sarah. She just walked up to Derek and draped herself over his shoulder. "Babe, the valet is waiting." Tiffany whined, popping a piece of gum. Just finishing up the trash removal, Tiff, Derek said, standing up and buttoning his Italian suit jacket. He looked down at Sarah one last time. Don't contact me. My lawyer will send you the schedule for when you can pick up your boxes of whatever junk you have left. Oh, and Sarah, try to marry rich next time. Although at 30 your odds aren't looking good. He tossed a $20 bill onto the table as if he were tipping a bad server. For the bus fare, he sneered. They walked out, their laughter echoing down the hallway. Sarah sat in the silence of the room, the $20 bill staring up at her. It was the ultimate insult. She didn't scream. She didn't flip the table. She simply stood up, her legs feeling like lead, and walked out into the pouring rain. She had a shift at the Rusty Spoon in an hour, and she couldn't afford to be late. Her life as she knew it was over. But she had no idea that her real life was about to begin. 3 months later, Sarah's life had settled into a gray, exhausting rhythm. She was living in a cramped studio apartment that smelled of mildew, working 60 hours a week at the Rusty Spoon, a rundown diner on the edge of the city's industrial district. It was a Tuesday, pouring rain again. The bell above the door jingled and a gust of cold wind blew in. Hey, you get out! The manager, a sweaty man named Rick, shouted from behind the counter. Standing in the doorway was a man who looked like he hadn't bathed in weeks. His coat was held together by duct tape, his beard was matted, and he was shivering violently. He was known around the neighborhood as Old Artie. Most people crossed the street to avoid him. I just wanted some water, the old man wheezed, clutching his chest. Water is for paying customers. Scram before I call the cops, Rick yelled, reaching for the phone. Stop, Sarah said, stepping out from behind the counter. She looked tired, her eyes dark-circled, but her voice was firm. Put the phone down, Rick. Sarah, if you feed him, he's never going to leave. It's bad for business, Rick spat. There's nobody in here, Rick, Sarah countered, gesturing to the empty diner. She walked over to the old man and gently took his arm. Come on, Artie. Take the booth in the back near the radiator. It's warmer there. She sat him down. The old man looked at her with watery gray eyes. He was trembling. I don't have any money, miss, he whispered, ashamed. Did I ask for money? Sarah smiled softly, a rare expression these days. I'm making a fresh pot of coffee, and the chef made too much beef stew today. If someone doesn't eat it, it's just going to go to waste. It was a lie. Sarah paid for the stew out of her own tips every time Artie came in. She brought him a steaming bowl and a hot mug. As he ate, his hands shaking so hard the spoon clattered against the ceramic, Sarah sat opposite him. She didn't treat him like a charity case. She treated him like a friend. How are you holding up, Sarah? Artie asked, his voice stronger after the soup. That ex-husband of yours, he's still bothering you? Sarah sighed, looking out the window. I saw his picture in the paper yesterday. He's closing a massive deal with the Pendleton Group. He's buying a yacht, and I'm worried about making rent, Artie. Artie paused, his spoon hovering midway to his mouth. The Pendleton Group, you say? Yeah, big real estate empire. Derek, my ex, says he's going to be the youngest vice president in the city once he seals the deal with the owner. Sarah laughed bitterly. He always gets what he wants. Artie lowered his head, hiding a strange glint in his eye. The owner of the Pendleton Group is a hard man to please, I hear. Maybe Derek shouldn't count his chickens. Sarah reached across the table and patted Artie's grimy hand. You have quite the imagination, Artie. Eat your soup. You're a good woman, Sarah, Artie said, his voice suddenly very serious. You have a pure heart. The world hasn't broken you even though it tried. Remember that. Thanks, Artie. That was the last time Sarah saw him. 2 days later, Artie didn't show up. A week later, Rick told her that the ambulance had picked up an old John Doe in the alleyway 2 blocks down. He had passed away from pneumonia. Sarah cried in the walk-in freezer for 10 minutes. He was just a homeless man to everyone else, but he was the only person who had listened to her for months. She bought a single white rose with her tip money and left it in the alley where he used to sleep. She thought that was the end of it. The letter arrived via certified mail at the diner. It was thick, creamy stationery with a gold-embossed letterhead, Blackwood and Thorne Attorneys at Law. Sarah's hands shook as she opened it. She thought it was a lawsuit. Maybe Derek was suing her for spousal support just to be spiteful. Dear Ms. Jensen, you are hereby requested to attend the reading of the last will and testament of Mr. Arthur H. Pendleton. The reading will take place this Friday at 10 a.m. at the Pendleton Tower. Arthur Pendleton. Sarah frowned. I don't know an Arthur Pendleton. She almost threw it away, thinking it was a scam. But the address was real, the tallest skyscraper in the city. On Friday, Sarah put on her only nice outfit, a black dress she used to wear to Derek's office parties, and took the subway to the financial district. She felt incredibly small standing in the marble lobby of Pendleton Tower. When she reached the top floor, the receptionist ushered her into a boardroom that was larger than her entire apartment building. The view of the city was breathtaking. And there, sitting at the mahogany table, was Derek. He was laughing loudly, chatting with a severe-looking man in a suit. Tiffany was next to him, scrolling on her phone, looking bored. When Derek saw Sarah, he choked on his water. "What on earth are you doing here?" Derek demanded, standing up. "Did you follow me? Sarah, this is a private legal meeting. I'm about to close the acquisition of the Century. Get out before I call security." "I was invited," Sarah said, holding up the letter. Derek snatched it from her hand. "A forgery. Has to be. Why would the late Arthur Pendleton invite a waitress to his will reading? You probably don't even know who he is." "I don't," Sarah admitted quietly. "But they sent me this." "Mr. Sterling, sit down," the severe lawyer said. This was Liam Thorne, the executor of the estate. He was young, perhaps mid-30s, with intense green eyes and a jawline that could cut glass. He looked at Sarah, and his expression softened imperceptibly. "Ms. Jensen is the guest of honor." "Guest of honor?" Tiffany scoffed. "Does she get a consolation prize, a toaster?" "Silence," Liam commanded. The room went cold. Liam pressed a button on the table. A massive screen descended from the ceiling. Mr. Pendleton recorded a video message 2 days before his passing. He requested that it be played only when all parties were present. The screen flickered to life. Derek straightened his tie, looking smug. "Here we go. The old man probably left the company to the highest bidder. That's me." The image resolved. It was an old man sitting in a leather chair. He was clean-shaven, wearing a suit that cost more than a car. But the eyes... Sarah gasped. "Artie," she whispered. Derek looked confused. "Who?" On the screen, the billionaire Arthur Pendleton spoke. His voice was strong, commanding, but with a familiar warmth. "If you are watching this, I have moved on to the next great adventure. To my board of directors, thank you for your service. To the vultures trying to buy my company." The camera zoomed in slightly. "Specifically you, Derek Sterling." Derek puffed out his chest. "That's me. He knows me." "I know you well, Mr. Sterling," the video Arthur continued. "I know you because I've been watching you. I know that you are a man who measures worth by the price of a watch. I know you treat your subordinates like cattle. And I know how you treated your wife." Derek's face went pale. Tiffany stopped chewing her gum. "You see," Arthur continued, "I believe that before someone inherits power, they must prove they have humanity. For the last 6 months, I have lived on the streets of this city as a social experiment. I wanted to see who would help a man who had nothing to offer in return." On the screen, Arthur leaned forward. "Thousands of people walked past me. They spat on me. But one person gave me her tips. She gave me hot soup. She listened to me when I was invisible. She defended me when others wanted to throw me in the gutter." Arthur smiled, and it was the same smile he gave Sarah over the bowl of stew. "To my nephew, I leave my vintage car collection. To my charities, I leave 10% of my liquid assets. And the rest? My majority share in Pendleton Industries, my real estate portfolio, the grand estate in the Hamptons, and my personal bank accounts totaling approximately $4.2 billion. The room was so silent you could hear a heart break. I leave to Sarah Jensen, because she was the only one who treated Artie like a human being. The screen went black. For 10 seconds nobody moved. Then Derek jumped up, knocking his chair over. This is a joke. She's a waitress. She served him soup. You can't give $1 billion company to a waitress. Liam Thorne stood up, picking up a thick stack of documents. He walked over to Sarah, ignoring Derek completely. It is no joke, Mr. Sterling, Liam said coolly. He placed the documents in front of a stunned Sarah. Ms. Jensen, or should I say Ms. CEO, we have a lot of work to do, and the first order of business involves the pending contract with Mr. Sterling's firm. Liam turned to Derek, a small, satisfied smile playing on his lips. Sarah, Liam asked, his voice low and respectful. Mr. Sterling is currently in the lobby of your building asking to buy your company. Would you like to proceed with the deal? Sarah looked at Derek. He was sweating, his eyes darting around in panic. He looked at Tiffany, who was staring at Sarah with open-mouthed jealousy. Sarah slowly stood up. The fear was gone. In its place was a cold, burning realization of power. No, Sarah said clearly. I don't think I do. The silence that followed Sarah's rejection of Derek's deal was broken by the sharp sound of Liam Thorne closing the leather portfolio. You heard the lady, Liam said, his voice like granite. Mr. Sterling, your proposal is denied. Security will escort you and your associate out of the building. Derek looked like he'd been struck by lightning. His perfect tan seemed to fade into a sickly gray. Sarah, wait. You don't know what you're doing. This is business. You're a waitress. You can't run an empire. You need me. Liam stepped in front of Sarah, blocking Derek's view. He didn't say a word. He just stared Derek down with those intense green eyes until Derek took an involuntary step back. Tiffany tugged on Derek's arm. Derek, let's go. Everyone is looking at us. This place smells like old people anyway. 2 burly security guards materialized. Derek, sputtering and red-faced, was practically dragged to the elevator, Tiffany trailing behind him, complaining about her heels. When the elevator doors pinged shut, Sarah's knees gave out. She grabbed the edge of the mahogany table to stop herself from falling. The adrenaline crashed, replaced by a tidal wave of panic. Oh my God. What did I just do, Liam? I can't do this. Derek was right. I serve coffee. I don't run billion-dollar corporations. Artie made a mistake. Liam gently took her arm and led her to the plush leather chair Derek had vacated. He poured her a glass of water from a crystal carafe. Arthur Pendleton didn't make mistakes, Sarah, Liam said softly, kneeling beside her chair so he wasn't towering over her. He was the shrewdest judge of character I've ever met. He watched you for 6 months. He saw something in you that this whole city is missing: integrity. Integrity doesn't read spreadsheets, Sarah mumbled into the glass. That's what I'm here for, Liam said. I was Arthur's right hand for 10 years. Now I'm yours, if you'll have me. Sarah looked at him. He was devastatingly handsome, yes, but more than that, he looked solid. Reliable, the opposite of Derek. Okay, she whispered. Where do we start? First. Liam stood up, a small smile touching his lips. We get you out of that diner uniform. You have a board meeting in 2 hours. The rest of the afternoon was a blur of terrifying luxury. Liam whisked her away in a black limousine that seemed longer than her entire apartment. They went to a private boutique where assistants who spoke in hushed tones draped her in fabrics she didn't know existed. When she stepped out of the dressing room in a tailored navy power suit that cost more than her car, she barely recognized herself in the mirror. Her tired eyes looked sharper. Her posture straightened. But the clothes were armor, and underneath she was still terrified. The boardroom was intimidating. 12 older men, all in expensive gray suits, sat around the table. They looked at her with a mix of curiosity and barely concealed disdain. They were wolves waiting for the lamb to trip. "Gentlemen," Liam announced, walking in behind her, "may I introduce your new CEO and chairman of the board, Ms. Sarah Jensen." There was a scattered polite applause. One man with slicked-back silver hair and eyes like a shark didn't clap. This was Marcus Cole, the CFO. He had expected to take over when Arthur died. "Ms. Jensen," Marcus said smoothly, his voice dripping with condescension. "A tragic day. We're all in shock." Now we were in the middle of discussing the layoffs at the Ohio manufacturing plant before this interruption. We need to cut 500 jobs to boost this quarter's profits for the shareholders. He slid a complex graph across the table towards her, enjoying the panic flashing in her eyes. He was trying to humiliate her instantly. Sarah looked at the graph. It meant nothing to her. The lines and numbers swam before her eyes. She felt the sweat trickling down her back. Derek's voice echoed in her head. "You're trash, Sarah." She felt Liam tense beside her. He was about to step in to save her. No, Sarah thought. Artie left this to me, not Liam. She pushed the graph back. "I don't understand this graph, Mr. Cole." A few snickers around the table. Marcus smirked. "Well, as I anticipated. But I do understand people." Sarah interrupted, her voice shaking slightly but gaining strength. "You want to fire 1,500 families. Why?" "To increase the stock value by 3%, Marcus said dismissively. "It's standard practice." Sarah thought about Artie shivering in the booth. She thought about the single mothers she worked with at the diner, terrified of losing a shift. Arthur, told the world he valued humanity over profit," Sarah said, standing up. The room went quiet. "If we fire those people just to make a line on a graph go up slightly, we are spitting on his legacy. Find another way to save money. The Ohio plant stays open. That is my first directive." Marcus turned purple. "You can't just, this is absurd. You're emotional. This is incompetence." "This is my company, Marcus," Sarah said flatly, channeling an authority she didn't know she possessed. "Liam, move on to the next item." Marcus leaned back, fuming, his eyes promising retribution. Liam looked at Sarah with a new expression, undisguised awe. She had survived the first round, but she knew the war had just begun. 3 weeks later, Derek Sterling was sitting in a much smaller, much dingier apartment than the penthouse he'd kicked Sarah out of. His sure-thing deal with Pendleton had evaporated, and with it his massive promotion bonus. He was hemorrhaging money. Tiffany was currently screaming at him from the bedroom because her credit card had been declined at Sephora. He turned on the TV, nursing a cheap whiskey. The evening news was on, and tonight is the annual Pendleton Charity Gala, the most exclusive event of the season. All eyes are on the mysterious heiress, Sarah Jensen, the former waitress who inherited the entire empire last month. Critics are calling her the Cinderella CEO, while Wall Street is holding its breath to see if she'll crash and burn. The screen showed live footage of the red carpet outside the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Limousines were pulling up, depositing the city's elite. Derek stared at the screen, a toxic mix of rage and regret boiling in his gut. That should have been him. That power. That money. It was all hers. The woman he used to order around was now the most powerful person in the city. "Tiffany!" Derek yelled. "Get dressed. We're going out." "Where we're broke, Derek." "We're going to that gala. I'm going to fix this." Derek still had his connections. He called in a favor from a slimy PR guy he knew and managed to get 2 last-minute tickets meant for a B-list celebrity who got the flu. When Derek and a sullen Tiffany arrived at the museum, the air smelled of expensive perfume and desperation. Photographers lined the red carpet, their flashes blinding. And then the entrance hall went silent. At the top of the grand staircase stood Sarah. She was wearing a custom Versace gown, a shimmering cascade of deep emerald silk that made her eyes pop. Around her neck was the Pendleton diamond, a priceless heirloom Arthur's mother used to wear. Her hair, once always tied back in a messy bun, was styled in elegant waves. She didn't look like a waitress playing dress-up. She looked like a queen surveying her kingdom. On her arm was Liam Thorne, looking devastating in a tuxedo. The way he looked at her with protective reverence made Derek want to vomit. "Oh my God," Tiffany whispered, actually impressed. "Is that Sarah?" Derek didn't answer. He just started walking up the stairs, pushing past senators and oil tycoons. He had to get to her. He had to remind her who she was, who they were. Sarah was in the middle of a polite conversation with the mayor when she felt a tap on her shoulder. "Sarah, you look unbelievable." She turned. When she saw Derek, her stomach clenched. It was a reflex, years of conditioning to be afraid of his disapproval. But then she felt the weight of the diamond around her neck. She felt Liam step closer to her back. "Derek," she said coolly, "I didn't think you were on the guest list. Tickets were $25,000 apiece. Hope you didn't stretch yourself too thin." Derek winced. "Sarah, please. Can we talk privately just for a minute? For old time's sake." Liam stepped forward. "Ms. Jensen is busy, Mr. Sterling." "It's okay, Liam," Sarah said, holding up a hand. She looked at Derek, really looked at him. He looked tired. His suit was slightly wrinkled. The arrogance in his eyes was replaced by a frantic, hungry panic. He used to look like a god to her. Now he just looked small. "5 minutes, Derek. On the balcony." They stepped out onto the stone balcony overlooking Central Park. The night air was cool. "Sarah, I messed up." Derek began running a hand through his hair. He turned on the charm, the same practiced smile that had made her fall for him 10 years ago. "I was an idiot. I got caught up in the stress of work and Tiffany. She was just a distraction, a midlife crisis." Sarah said nothing, her face unreadable. He stepped closer, reaching for her hands. She let him take them. His palms were sweaty. "I miss us, Sarah. We were a team. Remember, you and me against the world. I can help you. You're drowning in this, I know you are. Let me come back. Let me help you run the company. We can be the power couple of the century. I still love you, baby." He leaned in to kiss her. It would be so easy. It was familiar. It was the apology she had dreamt of for months. Sarah pulled her hands away sharply. "You don't love me, Derek," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. "You love the emerald dress. You love the diamond necklace. You love the $4 billion. That's not true." "It is," she said. "When I was wearing an apron and smelling like diner grease, I was trash you needed to take out. Now that I have Arthur's money, suddenly I'm your baby again. You're pathetic." Derek's mask slipped. The charm vanished, replaced by the cruel sneer she knew so well. "Don't get high and mighty with me, Sarah. You're a fraud. You're going to run this company into the ground within 6 months, and when you do, I'll be there to laugh." "Get out of my sight, Derek," Sarah whispered, turning away to look at the city lights. "Before I have security throw you down the stairs this time." Derek stormed back inside. Sarah took a deep, shuddering breath, fighting back tears. It hurt. It still hurt to see the man she loved turn into a monster. Liam appeared in the doorway holding 2 glasses of champagne. He didn't ask what happened. He just handed her a glass. "You did good," he said softly. Sarah clinked her glass against his. "I think I hate champagne." She managed a weak smile. "We can get a burger after this," Liam promised. "My treat." Sarah finally genuinely smiled. For the first time in what felt like years, she didn't feel alone. Meanwhile, across the ballroom, Derek was downing his 4th scotch at the open bar. A shadow fell over him. It was Marcus Cole, the shark-eyed CFO who hated Sarah. "Rough night, Mr. Sterling," Marcus murmured, swirling his own drink. Derek glared at him. "What do you want?" "I saw your little reunion on the balcony," Marcus said slyly. "It seems we both have a problem with the new management. She's incompetent, emotional. She's going to ruin everything Arthur built." Marcus leaned in close, his voice a serpentine whisper. You know her weaknesses, Derek. You know where the bodies are buried in her past. I know the company. If we work together, we can expose her for the fraud she is. We can take it all from her." Derek looked at Marcus. Then he looked across the room at Sarah, laughing at something Liam was saying, the camera flashes illuminating her joy. The envy burned in his chest like acid. "I'm listening," Derek said. For 2 months things seemed to be going impossibly well. Under Sarah's human-first leadership, Pendleton Industries wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. Public perception had shifted. The Cinderella CEO was a media darling. The Ohio plant which she saved had doubled its production efficiency out of sheer loyalty to her. Sarah sat in her office signing paperwork. She felt confident. She looked at the empty chair across from her where Liam usually sat. He was currently in London negotiating a merger. She missed him. More than she wanted to admit. Her secretary, a kind woman named Martha, buzzed in. "Ms. Jensen, the board has called an emergency meeting. They say it's urgent." Now, Sarah frowned. "I didn't call a meeting. It was called by Mr. Cole." Sarah's stomach dropped. She grabbed her notebook and headed to the boardroom. When she entered, the atmosphere was suffocating. The blinds were drawn. The 12 board members were staring at her in stony silence. At the head of the table sat Marcus Cole, and standing next to him, looking smugger than a cat with a canary, was Derek Sterling. "What is he doing here?" Sarah demanded, remaining standing. "He is not an employee, and he is banned from the building." "Mr. Sterling is here as a witness," Marcus said, his voice smooth as oil. He slid a black folder across the table. "Sarah, we have received some disturbing evidence regarding the validity of Arthur Pendleton's will." Sarah laughed nervously. "The will was probated months ago. It's ironclad." "Not if it was coerced," Derek piped up. He walked around the table enjoying the spotlight. "You see, ladies and gentlemen of the board, I was married to Sarah for 7 years. I know her handwriting. I know her tricks. And I know that she met Artie long before she claims." Derek pulled a stack of photos from his jacket pocket and tossed them onto the table. They were grainy, photoshopped images that looked like Sarah arguing with Artie in an alleyway, looking menacing. "These photos suggest you were harassing Mr. Pendleton," Marcus added. "And we have a witness statement from a Tiffany Miller claiming she heard you bragging about forcing the old man to sign the papers while he was delirious with fever." "That is a lie," Sarah shouted, slamming her hand on the table. "Tiffany is his girlfriend. She'd say anything he tells her to." "And then there's the matter of the embezzlement," Marcus interrupted, raising his voice. He clicked a remote and the screen behind him flared to life. It showed bank transfers moving millions of dollars from the Pendleton Charity Fund into a mysterious offshore account in the Cayman Islands. The account name, S.J. Holdings. "I didn't move that money," Sarah gasped. The room was spinning. "The transfer authorization came from your computer using your password at 2:00 a.m. last night," Marcus said, shaking his head with mock sadness. "We have the IT logs. It seems the pressure of the job got to you, Sarah. You wanted a golden parachute before the company realized you were incompetent." "Derek stole my passwords." Sarah pointed a trembling finger at her ex-husband. "He knows my old passwords. He guessed them." "I haven't seen you in months, Sarah." Derek lied smoothly, looking at the board members with wide, innocent eyes. "I'm just here to do the right thing. Arthur Pendleton was a titan. He shouldn't be ripped off by my ex-wife." Marcus stood up. "Sarah Jensen, pending a federal investigation, the board is invoking Article 15. You are immediately suspended as CEO. Security will escort you out." "You can't do this. Liam will—" "Mr. Thorne is in London," Marcus sneered. "And by the time he gets back, the police will already have you in custody." 2 security guards, new ones, men Sarah didn't recognize, grabbed her arms. "Get off me!" Sarah screamed. She caught Derek's eye one last time as she was dragged out. He wasn't smiling anymore. He was mouthing one word: karma. Thrown out onto the sidewalk in the pouring rain, stripped of her company, her reputation, and her dignity. Sarah stood alone. The paparazzi were already there, tipped off by Marcus. Flashbulbs exploded in her face like lightning. Sarah, did you steal the money? Sarah, did you fake the will? She covered her face and ran. She didn't go to her luxury apartment. She ran to the subway. She ran back to the only place that felt real. She ran to the alleyway behind the Rusty Spoon. The rain in the city didn't wash things clean. It just made the grime slicker. Sarah sat on a plastic milk crate in the alleyway behind the Rusty Spoon. It was the exact spot where she had first found Artie shivering 3 months ago. The irony wasn't lost on her. In fact, it felt like a physical weight crushing her chest. She was wearing a $3,000 suit that was now ruined, soaked through with muddy water, and smelling of the dumpster beside her. Her hair, styled that morning by a celebrity hairdresser, was plastered to her skull. She checked her phone. It was blowing up with notifications. TMZ Cinderella CEO escorted out in handcuffs. Financial Times embezzlement scandal. Rocks, Pendleton Empire. Text from Derek. I told you not to play with the big boys. She threw the phone into a puddle. It splashed and went dark. I failed you, Artie, she whispered, her voice cracking. The sound was swallowed by the hum of the city traffic. You gave me everything and I let them take it. Derek was right. I'm just a waitress. I was never meant to be a queen. She hugged her knees, burying her face. She waited for the inevitable, the police sirens, the arrest warrant, the end of her life. You know, a deep, familiar voice cut through the sound of the rain. Arthur once told me that the measure of a CEO isn't how they cut a ribbon. It's how they handle the knife in their back. Sarah's head snapped up. Standing at the mouth of the alley, silhouetted against the streetlights, was Liam Thorne. He looked like a wreck. His usually pristine tie was undone. His trench coat was soaked, and he was breathing hard as if he had run 10 blocks. A black town car was idling curbside with its door open, but Liam was ignoring it. Liam! Sarah choked out, standing up on shaky legs. You're supposed to be in London. The merger. To hell with the merger, Liam growled, striding toward her. He didn't care about the mud or the smell. He walked straight up to her and wrapped his hands around her upper arms, holding her steady. His eyes were blazing with an intensity she had never seen before. I saw the alert on the Bloomberg terminal. CEO suspended for fraud. I turned the jet around over the Atlantic. It's true, Liam. Sarah sobbed, the fight draining out of her. Or at least they made it look true. They have logs. They have bank transfers. Derek. He knew my old passwords. He and Marcus set me up. I can't fight them. They have the board, the police, the press. I have nothing. You have me, Liam said. The words were simple, but they hit Sarah with the force of a freight train. He let go of one of her arms to reach into the inside pocket of his drenched coat. He pulled out a small leather-bound notebook. It was tattered, held together by ancient rubber bands, the leather worn smooth by decades of use. Sarah frowned, wiping water from her eyes. Is that Artie's journal? The one he carried when he was homeless? The very same, Liam said. He gave it to me the night he passed away. He made me swear not to open the back section unless the company was in mortal peril. I respected his privacy. I thought he meant a hostile takeover by a rival firm. Liam ripped the wax seal on the back pages of the notebook. His hands were trembling slightly, not from cold but from rage. Arthur didn't trust Marcus Cole, Liam explained, scanning the handwritten pages under the dim alley light. He knew Marcus was skimming off the top, but he couldn't prove it before he got sick. And he knew that if he left the company to anyone other than Marcus, Marcus would try to destroy them. Liam's eyes stopped moving. He read a passage, then looked up at Sarah. A slow, terrifyingly cold smile spread across his face. It was a predator's smile, sharp and dangerous. "Oh, you brilliant, paranoid old fox," Liam whispered. "What?" Sarah asked, stepping closer. "What does it say?" "It says—" Liam looked at her, his voice steady. That we need to go back to the tower, right now. I can't go back there. Liam's security will throw me out. The police are probably already there. Let them be there, Liam said, taking her hand. His grip was iron. Sarah, listen to me. You are not a waitress. You are Sarah Jensen, the woman who showed kindness when no one was watching. Arthur didn't pick you by accident. He picked you because you have the one thing Marcus and Derek don't. What's that? Nothing to lose, Liam said. Now get in the car. We have a party to crash. 45 minutes later, the atmosphere inside the executive suite of Pendleton Tower was one of raucous celebration. Marcus Cole sat in the massive leather chair behind the CEO's desk, Sarah's desk. He had his feet propped up on the mahogany surface, crossing his ankles. He was holding a crystal tumbler filled with amber noir, a whiskey that cost $4,000 a bottle. Across the room, Derek Sterling was popping the cork on a bottle of vintage champagne. The foam spilled over his hands and he laughed, licking it off his fingers. To the new era, Derek shouted, raising the bottle. To the Cinderella story coming to a tragic end. Marcus smirked, swirling his drink. God, did you see her face when security grabbed her? I thought she was going to faint. She's weak, Derek said, walking over to pour Marcus a glass. She always was. I carried her for 7 years, you know. She would have been nothing without me. And now she's going to prison. Poetic justice, really. You sure the police are en route? Marcus asked. Just got a text from my contact at the precinct. Derek confirmed, checking his phone. They're issuing the warrant now. They'll pick her up at her apartment or under whatever bridge she's sleeping under within the hour. By tomorrow morning, Sarah Jensen will be trading her Versace for an orange jumpsuit. And the offshore accounts? Untraceable, Marcus said confidently. The money she stole is sitting safely in a shell company. Once the heat dies down, we split it. 50-50, just like we planned. I love it when a plan comes together. Derek took a swig of champagne straight from the bottle. You know, I might actually buy that penthouse back. It'll be sweeter knowing she lived there. You're a cruel man, Derek, Marcus chuckled. I like it. I learned from the best. Boom! The sound was like a gunshot. The double mahogany doors to the office didn't just open. They were kicked open with such force that the wood splintered around the lock. Marcus jumped so hard he spilled whiskey all over his shirt. Derek dropped the champagne bottle. It shattered on the floor, sending shards of glass skittering across the Persian rug. Standing in the doorway was Sarah. She was still wearing the wetsuit, but she had slicked her hair back. Her makeup was gone, leaving her face bare, pale and fierce. She didn't look like a victim. She looked like an executioner. Behind her stood Liam, holding the battered notebook, and behind him were 4 large men in dark suits who were definitely not the building's regular security. You're trespassing, Marcus screamed, scrambling to his feet. Get out. Security. Where is security? Your security team has been relieved of duty, Liam said calmly, stepping into the room. These gentlemen are private contractors, and they don't answer to you. I'm calling the police, Derek yelled, his voice cracking. He fumbled for his phone. You're finished, Sarah. You're a fugitive. Sarah walked slowly into the room. She stepped right over the broken glass and spilled champagne. She didn't say a word. She just walked to the front of the desk and stared at Marcus until he instinctively sat back down, intimidated by the sheer voltage of her anger. You think you're smart, Marcus? Sarah said. Her voice was low, devoid of the trembling fear from the alley. You think because you know numbers you know everything. But you forgot one thing. This was Arthur's building. He built it. He wired it. He loved it. Arthur is dead. Marcus spat, regaining some courage. And you're a thief. Liam, Sarah commanded, never taking her eyes off Marcus. Read the entry. Liam opened the notebook to the last page. He cleared his throat. Entry dated November 14th, 3 days before his death. Liam read, I have confirmed my suspicions. Marcus is moving test deposits to the Caymans. He thinks I am too sick to notice. He is preparing a trap for whoever succeeds me. Therefore, I have engaged the dead man's switch protocol on the office mainframe." Marcus's face went the color of curdled milk. "What? That's a myth. There's no such thing." "Read the rest, Liam," Sarah said. "The protocol is a passive listening system," Liam continued. "It is hardwired into the smoke detectors and the visual sensors in the teleconference screen. It records all audio and video in the CEO's office stored on an independent cloud server. It is dormant until activated by a specific voice command." The room went deathly silent. The only sound was the rain lashing against the panoramic windows. "And what is the command?" Marcus whispered, his eyes darting around the room. Sarah leaned over the desk, her face inches from Marcus's. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "The command is stripped for parts." As soon as she said the words, a high-pitched beep echoed from the ceiling. The massive screen on the wall behind the desk flickered to life. A robotic voice filled the room. "System activated. Uploading audio and video files from the last 24 hours to SEC Enforcement Division, FBI Cybercrimes Unit, and NYPD." On the screen, a progress bar appeared. "Upload 20%. 40%. "No," Derek gasped. "No, no, no." "It recorded everything," Sarah said, straightening up. "It recorded you admitting to the Photoshop. It recorded you bragging about guessing my passwords. It recorded Marcus talking about the shell company. It recorded you splitting the money." "Upload complete." "Turn it off!" Marcus shrieked, slamming his fist onto the keyboard. "Delete it!" "It's already gone, Marcus," Liam said, checking his watch. "And judging by the sirens I hear downstairs, the recipients have already opened the files." Derek looked at Sarah. Panic had completely consumed him. He looked at the door, then back at the window as if contemplating jumping. Then he lunged toward Sarah. "Sarah, wait! Listen!" He grabbed her hands, his palms sweaty and gross. "He made me do it, Marcus. He threatened me. He said he'd ruin my career. You know me, Sarah. You know I wouldn't do this to you. I love you." "We're married." "Divorced," Sarah corrected, yanking her hands away as if she had touched a hot stove. "We are divorced, Derek. But I can fix this." Derek babbled, tears streaming down his face. "I can testify against him. I can be on your side. Just tell them it was a misunderstanding." "Please, Sarah. I'm sorry about the apartment. I'm sorry about Tiffany. She meant nothing. You're the love of my life." Sarah looked at him. Really looked at him. For years this man had been her whole world. She had worked double shifts to buy him suits like the one he was wearing. She had cried herself to sleep wondering why she wasn't good enough for him. Now seeing him begging, snot running down his nose, willing to throw his partner under the bus to save his own skin, she felt nothing. No hate, no anger. Just a profound, empty pity. "You know, Derek," Sarah said softly, "the saddest part isn't that you betrayed me. It's that you sold your soul for a lifestyle you never earned. You're not a businessman. You're just a cheap suit with nothing inside." The elevator doors pinged. A squad of police officers led by the chief of police himself swarmed into the room. "Marcus Cole Derek Sterling," the chief barked. "Hands where I can see them." "It was him!" Derek screamed, pointing at Marcus as the officers shoved him against the wall. "He's the mastermind. I'm just a witness." "Shut up, you spineless worm," Marcus yelled back as the cuffs clicked around his wrists. Sarah stood still in the center of the chaos like the eye of a hurricane. She watched as the man who had broken her heart was dragged away, weeping and pleading. He tried to catch her eye one last time, shouting her name, but she simply turned her back. When the doors finally closed, leaving the room quiet again, Sarah let out a breath she felt like she'd been holding for 7 years. She slumped against the heavy oak desk. Her legs felt like jelly. "You okay?" Liam was there instantly, his hand on her shoulder. Sarah looked around the office. It was messy. It smelled of spilled whiskey. But for the first time it felt like hers. I need to call the Ohio plant, Sarah said, her voice trembling but strengthening with every word. I need to tell them their jobs are safe. And then, I need to find a new CFO. She looked up at Liam. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a raw, exposed honesty. Liam, she said, you came back. You risked your career, your reputation. For me. Why? Liam looked down at her. The professional mask he always wore had slipped. His green eyes were soft, filled with an emotion that terrified and thrilled her. Arthur wrote one last thing in the journal, Liam said quietly. On the very last page, last. What did he write? Liam reached into the notebook and turned to the final entry. He handed it to her. Sarah looked down at the shaky handwriting of the old man she had fed soup to. To Liam, I am leaving my company to Sarah because she has a good heart. I am leaving Sarah to you because you need one. She is the best thing that ever happened to this city. Don't be an idiot. Don't let her be alone. She deserves a king, not a jester like Derek. Sarah looked up, tears spilling over her lashes. He wrote that. He did. Liam smiled. And for the record, I was planning on coming back even before I saw the news. I couldn't focus in London. I kept thinking about you. About how you look when you're fighting for people. About how you smile when you think no one is looking. Liam stepped closer, closing the small distance between them. He reached out and gently brushed a wet strand of hair from her forehead. I don't want to be your lawyer anymore, Sarah, he whispered. I want to be the man who stands beside you. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. She reached up, placing her hand on his chest. He felt solid, real. I think, Sarah whispered, I'm ready to accept that resignation. Liam leaned down, and when his lips met hers, it wasn't like the rain in the alley. It was warm. It was electric. It was a promise. Outside, the storm had finally broken. The clouds were parting, revealing the glittering skyline of the city that Sarah Jensen now owned. But as she stood in the arms of the man who had saved her, she realized she had inherited something far more valuable than a billion-dollar empire. She had found her worth, and this time no one was ever going to take it away. Derek Sterling wanted a trophy wife and a quick fortune, but he ended up with a prison sentence and a lifetime of regret. He learned the hard way that you should never judge a book by its cover or a beggar by his coat. Sarah proved that true power isn't about the money in your bank account. It's about the integrity in your soul. In the end, the waitress served the billionaire exactly what he deserved, a cold plate of karma and a side of justice. What did you think of Derek's punishment? Did he deserve more jail time, or was losing everything to Sarah the ultimate revenge? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of twists, heartbreak, and triumph, please smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a drama.